Please be sure to follow me on all my socials. I post regularly on there, and you don't want to miss any of it. Thank you, and let's start.
Welcome to the world of Tales from the Trip.
Let me start out by saying that this was the absolute worst and most terrifying experience I have ever lived through, perhaps second only to the death of my dad. You may be wondering, why in the hell would you take 55 milligrams of 5-MeO-DMT? Well, I had no idea. What I thought I'd gotten a hold of was normal N-dimethyltryptamine. Thinking that's what I had, I measured it out and proceeded to vape it with the 2-liter foil paper method. I was expecting a trip similar to all the other experiences and videos, a very colorful meeting with higher intelligence while my body laid back and chilled. That couldn't have been farther from what actually occurred. I inhaled deeply to clear the entire bottle of smoke. I held it for maybe 5 to 7 seconds before I started to feel an odd vibration in my head. I was expecting this, but not so soon. I hadn't even exhaled before there was a rather loud in my head. At that point, I laid back and closed my eyes. What happened next I will try to describe to the best of my ability, but words will do it no justice. It was pure hell, possibly even literal hell. Visually, there's not much to speak of. It felt as if my soul and consciousness were sucked apart from my body with the strength of a black hole. I was half lucid at first, enough so I could think to myself, "You really fucked up. You're about to die." Obviously, I was going to fight this as hard as possible, but in the end, there was no use. Physically, it felt as if something with the force I could never describe had me pinned to the bed. I remember being unable to move my face or arms as I struggled. It felt as if my skin was melting under the pressure. The more I fought it, the more intense the violence became inside the black hole. It felt as if my body were being flung around the inside of a tornado and crashing against things at breakneck speed, all while moving at what seemed like the speed of light in an eternal darkness. Once I was completely beaten up and unable to fight, I surrendered to death. I was completely disassociated from the real world and any sense of self. It was the most jarring feeling. During this time, I actually felt myself stop breathing. Time did not exist in this dark eternity I was in, but I woke up face down on the floor at some point. It took another 20 minutes after I woke up until I felt somewhat normal again. Even then, the death that I had just experienced was all that I could think about. This wasn't ego death, this was actual death. I noticed that my legs were stinging. I looked down to discover that I had gouged them during my trip. I mean seriously deep scratches from a guy that barely has fingernails. Not only that, I had bruises all over my legs from where I'd apparently been convulsing and kicking furniture. I'm thankful to still be here. I urge anyone out there to really know what you're buying and test it yourself if possible. 5-MeO-DMT is nothing I'll ever come close to doing again, and it is not to be taken lightly. Be safe. Some friends of mine and myself had been turned on to 5-MeO-DMT for the first time while on vacation in San Francisco. Upon our return to LA, my friends invested in a quantity of it, for personal use and also to share with friends. We are all experienced travelers and had glowing first encounters with the substance. We gathered at the home of a friend with the group to share the love. The person who had ordered the 5-MeO-DMT had purchased a digital scale, though its smallest unit of measurement was 0.01 grams. He took 3 doses over the course of a week, and by the time of this event, was very comfortable with his ability to measure a proper dose, assumed to be 0.01 grams. There were 6 people in the group taking the drug that day. I was busy with homework and was occupied in another room, though I did stop in to check on the gang at one point early in the encounter. They were set up in a circle in the host's bedroom, which was small but comfortable. My boyfriend, who had used it before, went first, followed by the first-timers. Only 3 more people would do it that day. The first 2 people to go had positive experiences. I left the room when my friend G was having his dose loaded into the pipe. A few minutes later, I was disturbed by a commotion from upstairs, a banging sound, followed by elevated voices. I then heard my boyfriend come downstairs and call 911. Immediately, I dropped my things and went upstairs. I have been very lucky in that, in my several years of drug use, few of my friends have been in what I would call real danger. I have seen people lose consciousness, and I have talked people down from some fairly bad acid experiences, but I have never seen any reaction as violent as this. G had moved from a sitting position on the bed to a flailing half-fetal position, close to falling on the floor. His eyes were bugged, his face red, and he was making groaning noises. His breathing had become shallow and halting shortly after taking his hit, and shortly thereafter, he retched and vomited. The vomit contained more than a little blood, which hung in strings from his face and slicked the floor. His breathing was labored at this point, aided by his girlfriend R, who had put her fingers in his mouth to prevent him from biting his tongue. The whole time she was encouraging him to keep breathing and telling him that she loved him. He shook and twitched, totally unresponsive. She managed to get her fingers out of his mouth and replace them with the jewel case. Then the screaming began. At this point, he was almost in a pile on the floor. He began to twitch and kick violently, and R lost her grasp. At this point, we grabbed him and pinned his limbs to the bed, waiting for the paramedics to come. I had grabbed his left arm and really had to hold on to keep his thrashing contained. His eyes were wide open, and he let forth these long, drawn-out primal screams. I have never seen anything like it. It wasn't quite terror, but it was pretty scary to the people watching. Though he was quite red in the face, at least he had found the breath to yell with. Shortly thereafter, we heard sirens approaching. I went downstairs to greet the paramedics and explain the situation. Convulsing, vomiting blood, screaming, and unresponsive to his name. I didn't go back upstairs, but it was about 5 to 10 minutes before G had his arms draped across a paramedic on each side and exited the building on his own 2 feet. Needless to say, everyone was relieved. Later, G felt great. He came home from the emergency room and recorded a bit with his band later that evening. "Geez, you guys," he said, "a little bit of convulsing and you call 911? You're a bunch of weenies." He was kidding, but he really felt great. His experience, apparently, was not at all negative. He relayed space journeys and encounters with elves that are his story to tell, not mine. The night before all this happened, G had spent several hours drinking alcohol. He also snorted an unknown quantity of MDMA. His stomach was empty except for some Sammy, a supplement, and 2 bananas. The pipe had been passed between 3 people before it came to him, and may have contained residue from the prior hits, making his dose higher than average. What did I take from all this? I'm looking forward to taking 5-MeO again in the future, but it is something that I will never do alone. I advise all people, especially if this is their first time, to be respectful of their body before ingesting this, or any other heavy psychoactive chemical. Don't drink the night before. Wait a few weeks between doses of this and any other drug. Eat lightly, and stay hydrated. G later compared his experience to taking a cosmic voyage and forgetting to leave the life support on. Though he has said he would do it again in the future, he is grateful for our assistance and knows how easily he could have been hurt. It is very essential to add antihistamines to the list of control factors. The ingestion of an over-the-counter antihistamine, Benadryl, which was the only control factor not shared by others during the experience, and the unnatural dilation of the bronchial tubes may have contributed to or caused the negative experience. Please, be careful. Please be sure to like the video if you are enjoying it so far, and subscribe if you haven't already. It truly does mean a lot if you do this. It only takes 1 second if you think about it. Also, comment down below your wackiest 5-MeO DMT experience. I'd love to hear them. Enough with me interrupting. Let's get back to the video. In an attempt to find out what lay at the edges of the slight curling vibrations at the onset of a mild 5-MeO DMT experience, I found the edge. First and foremost, I would like to recommend that no person try this ever. I have some friends who have been where I have, and they are changed. Me and my friend Jay were sitting around his house pondering what to do with our evening. A gram of pond, 5-MeO-DMT, a meth pipe, and minutes or hours to waste. Having spent the greater part of the previous months tripping Foxy or taking nitrous or eating pills, something more substantive was on the horizon. The night started out simply enough with us watching cartoons and smoking small 3 to 5 milligram doses of 5-MeO-DMT. The small doses of the chemical have the wondrous ability to slide one from one's body into positions of slight rapture. Rapture, I call it. It is the experience of having one's nerves firing simultaneously and the beginnings of the violent separation to come. As Jay and I were passing the pipe back and forth, I got a bit stupid. Jay had gone into his bathroom to hit it and hadn't nearly cleaned out the 10 milligrams he put in the pipe. He handed it to me with not a word. At this point, I had decided to take the substance to the next level, and I put approximately 20 milligrams of 5-MeO-DMT into the pipe. I sat down on his toilet and looked in the pipe. I could see there was a little more than there should be. I looked at the edge of the cliff, my sense of self-preservation safely tucked away under months of successful, non-death-causing drug use. Throwing caution to the wind is a term that, while quite cliché, it manages to summarize the moment quite well. The lighter sparked, the flame hungry, the pipe quite hot. Once one has performed numerous hits off a pipe of 5-MeO-DMT, one begins to expect the hazy amber smoke that one gets. Today I got milk. Think the purest white milk in high contrast in a photograph against a black backdrop. As it began to enter my lungs, the sensation I can recall thinking most clearly was a profound, wordless, "oh shit." The walls immediately grayed into a sensational breakdown of color. Things all grayed into a scene, something like static on a TV tuned to an unaired channel. My cognizant being managed to become lodged in a synapse somewhere in my brain as a torrent of raw essential chemical energy washed over me, tossing me about like a rag doll. I would imagine that I have had an experience quite like a rafter caught in the well of a waterfall being tossed and thrown without ability to object. I was aware only of my inability to have awareness. I was forced into existence without check or balance, without ego or memory. I was simply being washed away. I was experiencing sound louder than I had ever heard, sight brighter than my eyes could see, vibrations more physically intense than any feeling. They all coincided. They were not separate feelings. There was unity, feeling, sight, sound all inside this rushing, swirling vortex of unimaginable intensity. Think electrocution while being drowned in a washing machine and having your entire body perforated with needles, while a mini sun set to strobe light flies around into fantastic patterns. I seem to remember hearing the echoing, orgasmic, thundering words pounding in my skull. "Oh my god, holy shit, oh my god," etc. As the torrent of scouring energy pulsed through my body, I began to hear a sensation. I emerged for a moment from the ether to see my best friend pulling on my shirt, asking me if I was okay. I went under again, my name called more, coming out. I came out. I apologized. "I'm so sorry," over and over again. I had been torn away from myself. I existed at that moment as the only person who had been awakened from the entirety of the universe by my best friend. There was nothing else. There was everything. Then there was me, being saved by my friend. 10 or 15 minutes, I was on his bathroom floor, screaming at the top of my lungs, staring, but unseeing. He thought I was going to die. I kicked the guard on his shower. My legs had gone into the shower. My legs were green. I felt as though I'd committed the world's most filthy sin. I was simply shattered. Flashbacks occurred for a couple of months afterwards. The sense panic and my ego being torn from my hands was present each time. It can be described as a most beautiful terror. There is something quite artistic to the pain of it, and something quite mucky and dirty about re-entering the world of ego-based communication. Would I ever do it again? Go to hell. Should you try it? You should be beaten to death with your own shoe for asking. Has it changed my life? In every conceivable way. The following was my first real experience with 5-MeO-DMT, and it will probably be my last too. First of all, I'm aware I took way too much. I had read about it a lot, including the pros and cons, and a few glowing and negative experiences so that I could get both sides of the story. What screwed up my dosage was that the first couple times I tried to smoke it, the effects were less than impressive, or at least nothing like I expected. This made me think I wasn't taking a full dose. I only know that it was 130 milligrams now, because I recently found a good scale and weighed out approximately the same amount on it. Anyway, it started with me and a friend, who I originally wanted to sit and watch me as I tried it, and vice versa. I educated him on the substance and made him read about it some. Then we did some chakra balancing and decided to go for it. Justin wanted to try it first, so I hooked up a smoking surface and poured out a little tiny bit. He smoked it. It smelled like ass to me, but afterwards he claimed it tasted good. Yeah, whatever. Anyway, he starts chanting like he's an Indian, and I just sort of watched slightly amused. It was neat. He really liked it a lot. This got me excited about using it, so as soon as he was in a stable mindset again, it was my turn. Since he didn't experience the level of intoxication and ego loss I had read about, which was my main goal, I threw some more on the foil spoon thing, smoked up as much as I could, and sat back. It was disappointing. I felt an intense energy flow through my body a couple times, then just felt introspective and talkative. Looking back, I think my chronic bronchitis probably prohibited me from maximizing the smoke intake, and that's why it didn't affect me as much. We waited a while and talked about our experience into the mic. We recorded everything, then tried it again a little later. It was notably less intense for either of us. This bummed me out, and I told Justin we should probably wait another day to do it again. Well, as the night rolled on, we got bored and watched a Terrence McKenna video. After watching that, we both decided it was time to sniff some of the drug and experience it to the full effect. I broke it out and dumped a couple piles on a CD case. Since I hadn't achieved the level I wanted earlier, I added more. And also, since sniffing requires more than smoking, I added more again. We both ended up snorting what I considered about the same as a decent line of coke. This was way too much, and a really fucking stupid thing for me to have done, especially since we both decided to do it at the same time this time. We snorted the stuff almost at the same time at about 11 p.m. The burning was horrible. It throbbed like having ants in your nose or something. Water helped a little though. After the throbbing, the feeling of burning crystals sliding down our throats came next. Pretty unpleasant to say the least. This feeling, and the feeling that was about to hit me hard, was the last thing I remember for the next 30 minutes. According to the tape, we both passed out for about 30 minutes. I awoke with my head leaning off the futon in a very odd way, drooling all over myself with Justin right in my face, telling me that I can't go yet and that I had to pull through. He was attempting to help, but what it really did was scare the ever-living shit out of me. After a couple minutes of this, I got up and walked away from him, wiped the drool up, and changed my sweat-drenched clothes after. I was terrified of death while on the futon with Justin. Now it had transformed into an uneasy feeling of total permanent mindfuck. I saw myself in the mirror. My eyes were totally black. I looked like a weird alien creature. I know people say you don't get visuals from this stuff, but I did. Breathing bottles and blurred objects, and everything shimmering. Justin had his fair share of visuals too. Anyway, after the mirror, I lay down in my bed and decided to sleep. I left Justin in the other room. He was cleaning up the beer and water he knocked off the table. We think with his head, and he passed out. We can't be sure though. Soon my feeling of mindfuck went away. About 10 minutes after waking up, I think. It seemed like my eternal hell though. I got up and moved into the other room, and we started talking about what happened. Soon my negative feelings turned into the greatest feeling of my life. It was so strange. 1 minute terror, the next, utter bliss. Luckily, the great feeling and insight lasted much longer than the other sections of the trip. I guess you could say I died, unconsciousness, then I went to hell, terror, then I was in limbo, the mindfuck, then I found heaven and stayed there. I was feeling so happy, but felt very strange, considering if either of us had been lying straight back while unconscious, we could have easily choked to death on vomit or drool, which I would think the biggest danger of this drug would be. Basically, I went from having the worst trip of my life to the best feeling I've had in months all in about an hour. By the next day, I felt 100% back to normal. Justin and I both experienced unconscious drooling, and our noses trying to force out the shit through these weird snorting sounds the tape picked up. It seemed like our bodies were rejecting the drug in a big way. Also, Justin puked all over the futon at the end of the trip. Needless to say, between the drool, the snot, and the puke, my futon was a nasty mess. This was the biggest mistake I've ever made with hallucinogens, and even though I know if I took a lower dose of this again I'd be fine, I probably will avoid 5-MeO-DMT for a long time. I learned just how dangerous these drugs can be, and I'm lucky it wasn't one of the more lethal ones. I also learned the feeling of a hellish bad trip seems like it's an eternity, and it's some place I will attempt to stay away from by any means necessary. Thanks for listening. That's what taking 130 milligrams of 5-MeO-DMT is like, in my experience.